In our first reading, we get to experience the prophet Ezekiel give yet another prophetic action. He's called by God to carry out this weird action because of its sign value. And then the sign value is made known that, look, because my people continue to sin against me, I am lifting my protective hand. And what Ezekiel, my prophet, is doing is showing what's going to actually happen to you, my people. You will be sent into exile. And I love the way that this particular reading starts off. Son of man, you live in the midst of a rebellious house. They have eyes to see, but do not see. They have ears to hear, but do not hear, for they are a rebellious house. Every time we rebel against God, in other words, every time we sin, we're not using our senses. The higher senses that God gave us, our internal senses. And in a sense, we're not using our eyes well. We're not using our ears well. We have eyes, but we do not see. We don't see with the eyes of faith when we give in to sin. We have ears, but we don't use our spiritual ears. We don't hear the voice of our guardian angel trying to protect us from sin. We don't hear the voice of the Holy Spirit and either biting us to say, don't do that, you know you're not supposed to do that, it's going to bite our conscience, or wooing us away, saying there's a greater joy for you. Instead, we tend to give in to the temptation and the evil one. We look at what is enticing instead of what is actually good. And so, isn't it interesting? We look, but we don't truly see. Instead, we see what is false. We gave in to the falsity. Oh, this will make me happy. No, it won't. And so what happens is we're blinded. Sin blinds us. It represses our senses. It dulls our intellect. It lessens who we are. How awesome it is that we have a God who forgives. And so we have our gospel reading today. If we have a God who forgives over and 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 over again, and we are to be like God, because God sent his son Jesus to be a model for how we are to live. And we hear Jesus' words. You need to forgive your brother 70 times 7. In other words, beyond anything that seems rational, beyond anything that seems that we're even capable of doing. Because forgiveness comes from God, which is why it's possible. So who's the person or the persons in your life that it seems impossible to forgive? It is possible with God. So ask God 70 times 7 times. Help me to forgive this person. Keep asking. Forgiveness is a choice. Just like we heard in the parable. The master chose to forgive the debt. It had nothing to do with feelings. It had nothing to do with trusting the person again. It just said, you owe me nothing. Obviously, the master was unable to trust his servant. Trust has to be built up. but he still forgave him. The servant was thrown into jail because of something else that he did. He was still forgiven of his debt, but he created a new debt. How often then are we just creating new debts and new debts and new debts? Know that we can still go to the Lord and ask for forgiveness, beg for forgiveness, and he will. But know that in the sacrament of reconciliation, we've got the act of contrition, which all the different variations generally say, and I will amend my life. I must make the attempt to change. I must use my will, which had been used for sin, to say no more. My will now choose what it wants to choose, which is actually, the will is always trying to choose the good. So I will choose the good and reject evil. And then we fall. And we beg the Lord for forgiveness again. Lord, strengthen me. And the more often that we come to the sacrament of confession, the more we can then actually have this lived experience of God's mercy. And then I must share it. There's so many people that I have trouble forgiving. Have you received God's forgiveness yourself? If God can forgive you, then he can help you forgive those who are seemingly just as sinful as you against God, who sin against you. They sin over and over and over again against you. Well, forgive them over and over and over again, because God forgives you over and over and over again. But you won't know that unless you beg God for forgiveness over and over and over again. So we'll take a moment to pay attention to where we are at in our own lives. Am I one who has to go to confession more often? Am I one who has to now share that experience of God's mercy with others?